Welcome to the Ebony Road Players Podcast. I'm your host, Edye Evans-Hyde, singer, performer, and founder of Ebony Road Players. As a Black theater company in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Ebony Road Players strives to inspire, educate, and engage the cultures of our community. In this podcast, we take a deeper dive into the topics and issues surrounding the stories that we tell. So let's jump right into some meaningful dialogue and celebrate the diverse communities that we share. Welcome, everyone, to the Ebony Road Players Podcast. I'm Edye Evans-Hyde, and I'm excited to have a new friend on our podcast today. I just want to tell everyone that we are celebrating the West Michigan Loving Day celebration. Of course, that's the West Michigan aspect of it, but Loving Day is actually a national and international celebration and observance of the 1967 Virginia, did I say that? Loving versus Virginia Supreme Court case of 1967. That's the best way to say it. And for you people who don't know about it, it is one of the last cases during civil rights that struck down laws that at that time criminalized interracial marriage. And two amazing people, Mildred and Richard Loving, were the center of that particular court case, which struck down, gave the abilities for people to be married of different cultures, different races, and has been used for probably one of the last events, court cases is for same-sex marriage as well. So it's kind of a little important piece of history that a lot of people don't know about. But having said that, I want to introduce you to Reaiah True. We have just met, and Reaiah, I don't normally everyone I have on, I know their history, but I don't know yours. We just met, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we just met. And so why don't you tell people who you are and tell a little bit about yourself, then we can kind of dive in, okay?
All right, sounds good. Well, greetings and home very much. That means thank you in Taina for hosting and having me on your show and on this podcast. As Edye said, my name is Reaiah True, and I am a multifaceted artist and life explorer. I grew up in San Diego. I was born overseas, but my early years were spent in San Diego, kind of moving around a lot. So in addition to being multi-ethnic, I definitely experienced a range of school systems from wealthy places that had excellent books and floors in the hallways to very rough places where my teacher was the principal of the school at Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary in San Diego. And so he was pulled out a lot for, handling all kinds of things all around the school. And we were playing double dutch in the classroom. And,
Wow.
At a particular school, I could see out of all of the places I went that the children knew that no one cared. It was definitely probably the most dynamic as far as the heaviness I could see in the kids around me. And we were not at that school for very long, but it just gave me a lot of dynamics as far as the financial institution that influences school systems, and then also obviously where there were heavier populations of specifically brown population were the places that had less resources available and encouragement along with the education. But even in places that were perceivably more financially sound. The establishment model is very strong in school. And so I think that's a lot of my frame of reference in how I see the world and how I gauge what I see as an adult in the world. Because since I moved around so much, I feel like I got a pretty good sense of different areas, how different regions perceive. This is how you exude affluence or being with it, whether it's more about being a business focused as the height of the tiers, or if it's more based on what the social experience and acceptance is, whether that's music or media. I grew up without TV a lot throughout my life. So that was another big piece that I was just having this conversation yesterday about feeling a little outside of everywhere that I moved around to. And I had felt as a child that if I had just had a little bit more TV exposure, I would have been able to chameleon a little bit more. Now my hair is red, and I grew up out west where we walked to school. And so I was a lot darker than I am now here living in the cold regions with, we're almost halfway through the year and we're now, but up till now we did have snow, like not even 2 weeks ago. So, this cold region has changed my tone of hair and skin. And just so those things are interesting how that affects my environment. And as being multi-ethnic, moving around a lot, I had many reasons I could potentially go through the files as to why I felt outside of whatever was going on socially. And eventually I gave up on that because it was essentially me beating into my own head. Oh, maybe I'm not dark enough. Maybe I'm not light enough. I also had a white mother. My dad was actually from Dominican Republic, so he wasn't an African American, and I didn't grow up with him at all. So I had no frame of reference of his culture. My mom raised us saying that we were black and white with with a wave of a hand, with some kind of indigenous nation in there. And so it's been later on in life that I've learned more about the Taino people who Columbus first interacted with. And it has brought up this thing that I like to say now, like, how is it that all these people know about Columbus, but nobody knows Taino? Like, shouldn't that be like equal in the story? Like those words should be equal as far as I can see, seeing as how this was a whole people and this is one person. I mean, not that it was only Columbus, but that did all of that, but just that's the name that we all know. So in my current time, I feel the impression of history so much more coming to the forefront, why it's important to come to terms with all of the things that are real, not claiming things that are not real, that I don't need, I feel claimed by no one. And so it's like belonging nowhere and everywhere is how I feel.
And go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just looking for the evidence of that in my life is kind of where I walk.
That is a very interesting, and I think what is important now in this 2023 is that that's what people are finding. They're not being categorized in, like you said, people are putting you in different spaces or whatever. You've been to all these spaces and you're finding time to find out who you really are. And it's not the this or that people want to put you into and the history behind that. For Loving Day, I think that's one of the most perfect things for us to talk about, because also right now there is a pushback on people finding that strength to find out who they really are. with the banning of books. Well, I don't know if you know this, but the show that we are doing for Loving Day is called Alabama Story, and it is about a banning of a children's book. And this was in 1959 that this was going on. And as you and many other people who are multiracial have lived multicultural lives are finding that they don't need to be in particular spaces. I don't know how to say this, your experience is much deeper than putting it in particular categories. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Through trying to fit the categories that the world poses, not being able to, has caused me to step back and realize that it is a heart and a mind issue. Can I accept you and your presence and your right to exist and your right to be in your strength and to shine your gifts? Can I be in my gifts and allow that to also be that you get to have yours, I get to have mine? We don't have to compete. What is problematic about that? And for me, when I ask myself those questions, because in moving around, I felt the heat from a lot of different people, and it would shock me because I was given up for adoption at birth. My mom actually got me back and gave me to an African-American woman to be my guardian for the first 3 years of my life. So I was actually raised by a Black woman that I called mama first. And then my mom went through this court case to get us back and da 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 da. And so I'm actually, my frame of reference really is so much more comfortable in the Black community, even though after 4 years of age, I wasn't raised in that environment. And the boisterousness that the Black community tends to encourage out of their youth was like, what is this to my white mom, so it was a battle of influence and the who I am allowed to be from the get-go. And I mean, I feel like a lot of people go through that. It doesn't matter what the racial influence of that family is. But that's real in all kinds of households. So while I absolutely acknowledge the racial aspect of the tensions, I have also challenged myself to think bigger than that, because I see that within all of our communities, there are still the heart-mind issues of communication. So that's why I really especially love that their last name was Loving, because loving really is, as cliche as it may sound, it is the absolute power. And in being able to love bigger, even our opposition, is the only way to help them to see why it's in their best interest to go along with the better communal plan, and to love our lives enough to give space to each other. And it is so beautiful to know where we come from. It's true. It is important to have frame of reference. And for me, that's an international story. And I love that. It is individual, and it's also, person to person, one-on-one, and it is the great collective too. So yeah, I love loving, and I love the Lovings for commemorating.
So did you know about the Lovings, about the court case? When did you find out about that?
I feel like I learned about that when I lived in California, because I did do a lot of research into the civil rights movement, and And then also the Rodney King incident happened when I lived in California. So that was a very big turning point for me in looking at the situation. And how that played out for me was Monday morning, because the incident happened on a weekend. Monday morning, first class was history, and I had a teacher who had been a professor of college before teaching middle school. So he was really good at initiating debates, and he just bailed on whatever the class plan was for that day, put it all down, and instead we were going to just have our hour be a discussion. And I was really impressed by that. This was a white teacher. And I just thought that that showed a lot of sensitivity to what everybody needed to just process. And now with this teacher, he didn't assign seats. Some classes we would have assigned seats, but in California, it was a lot bigger, schools. There are a lot of gangsters. There's already shootings. A fourth grader teacher in the 90s. My school had been shot into. A kid brought a gun to show and tell. So we didn't know if that was like he didn't know or, whatever. So things like that were already happening. There were security guards at my school in the 80s and 90s, and one's carrying. Already metal detectors, all that stuff. So at this particular morning, everybody, piped in on the conversation about what they believed about the Rodney King incident of him being beaten by all these cops. And it got to the point where it just got so jumbled in the room. Everybody was talking at the same time. And I was just like, okay, now it's just getting heated in here, and anything that seemed productive, we're on the verge of it not being good.
Yeah.
And so I just realized I didn't hear what I felt I had to say. I didn't hear that from anybody. So I raised my hand. And all of a sudden it got silent in the room. Okay. The room fell silent, as if the teacher yelled, nope, that's not what happened. I was I still have my hand up, and I was I looked around the room what did I miss?
What happened?
And as I turned around just in those quick milliseconds, I saw the room in a different way that day. Everybody had self-segregated. We chose to sit in the same seats every time we walked in that room. That teacher did not assign us seats. We could have all sat in totally different seats every single time we walked in that room if we wanted to, and we didn't choose to. All of this is download flush through my mind as I'm just what did I miss? They're files just flashing, oh my gosh. So the room was kind of set up with chairs, so as if this is a bird's eye view. Let me see if I can get
right. Got it. Right.
And the picture is in this spot right here. So, I actually, so there were the Filipinos right back behind me. There were there was a very studious group of African-American students that sat all together. And then there were the gangsters that over here behind. And then were the Latinos were kind of close to the Filipinos. And then there was next to the studious Black students, there were the studious white students. And then there was Melissa and me, the only two in the front row. I was all of a sudden, again, also realizing about myself, look at me, just what do I got to do? Let me.
Right. Oh my goodness. What a story.
see who's over trying just by where they're sitting in the class. Okay. Like, oh my gosh. And so I just, again, like this was just a couple seconds, but literally so much information flooded into my mind over this minute that I was just like, oh my word, I can't look at the world the same anymore. Like we have self-segregated in this classroom. And I just had said that, what is right and what is wrong. And clearly he was not armed. And what I saw was a group of people ripping a man out of his car, beating him to near death. Now that is absolutely wrong. It didn't matter what color anybody was. I don't want to hear about that. That really doesn't freaking matter. Why are people just randomly beating the life out of people? And they're supposed to be in charge. Right. That is what is wrong here. And honestly, the sigh of relief in the room after I said my piece helped me to also realize that they were waiting to see whose side I was going to take. Mm-hmm. And that it was about race for everybody in the room at that point. And that also was very discouraging to me because I was like, oh, why is it the option for the big suspense to be about what color I'm going to talk about? When we're talking about a heart and mind issue and a justice issue, how are these people in leadership? Who is not holding them to the standard they're supposed to be making sure the civilian is at? Right. They're below us at this point.
And the other thing about that is it's so easy to do that. It's very difficult, like you did, to actually think things through. It's easier to go on one side or the other when the root of the problem is, like you said, the justice behind it. One person is wrong, the other person is right, and you can put as much fodder in it as you want. But it's easier, I think, for us to look at things in a racial aspect of things. And this is where I kind of find, and I might be wrong about this, someone like you who have traveled all over, who's had the experience of a white mom. Your very first few months was with a black mom. You've been in situations where you might be the only person that looks like you, who has the experience that you have. But sometimes I feel like that allows you to be a little deeper and a little more aware of what others cannot see. Do you feel that sometimes?
Yes, and I like to be underestimated. I am shocked more than not about people who count on me needing to play into a societal practice of passing or whatever that is, because in no white environment am I treated like a white person. Not that I would even want to be, because when people think that I'm light enough, that my skin is light enough for me to take a negative frame of mind as a side, an option. When they try to say things to me, I find it funny because they are counting on me playing along. And that puts them at a risk that they didn't even know that they were taking. And those are finite moments that I enjoy.
Putting people on the spot just a little bit, are you?
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
I hope that eventually people will just be wiser and be embarrassed about even having those thoughts pass through their minds, let alone saying it, let alone trying to involve someone else's energy and spirit in that nonsense. Hopefully soon they will think better of it and know why it doesn't work for anyone.
Yeah.
But until then, I feel like it's better to play and have a little fun with it. And you know what I mean? Like flip it, get to enjoy seeing how they look uncomfortable when I flip it back. Like you don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, yes. And I think that's what's so interesting about Loving Day. I remember when I first decided that I was going to do this, because it's funny that you lived in California and that's when you found out about it. So my daughter was living in LA and she invited me and my husband to perform at this event called the Mixed Roots Festival. And I said, sure, we'd love to do that because we wanted to see her anyway. But when I got there, it was this Loving Day event. They showed the documentary of the Lovings. I knew nothing about this. And that was less than 20 years ago, I guess, knew nothing about it. Met all kinds of wonderful people who were actually celebrating, finding this space that made them comfortable about being biracial, multiracial, coming from all aspects of life. And that's why I found it. And I decided that it was good for me to see something like that because I'm Black, I'm not multiracial or biracial. I mean, you can go way back and I got freckles and stuff. So something's going on way back in the, back in the day, but my kids are. And I wasn't sure how they were being affected or how they were being looked at or like you having to explain, who you are or why you are who you are. And so I decided that needed to come here. That needed to be here because there's so many quiet families who are in those situations and they don't get a chance to really talk about their story or talking about, the things that they have to face. And this will be our 9th year doing this. And it's been fun. It's been fun to talk to people like you. And I've got a lot of couples who I've interviewed in the past, or they've been part of our process. And how does this Loving Day court case, how does it affect people now? And so that's what Ebony Road tries to do, is kind of tell these stories because they're not new stories. Do you know what I mean? That's been here forever. And we are just now highlighting probably the most important case during the civil rights movement is allowing people to be free enough to marry who they want to marry or be who they are. So I love this story. So you said you've traveled a lot. So you've been to California. That's kind of where you grew up. Where else had you been? And how'd you get to Grand Rapids? I guess that's my big thing.
Okay. So we as a family moved to Texas, a little tiny German town after San Diego. So I was turning and oh my. And then from there, I was shockingly gifted a bus ticket to go meet my dad at 19. And he didn't know that I was going to be arriving. And I didn't know I was going to be going until that day. So it was a very, very traumatic transition in my life. And so I spent some time there in Baltimore, Maryland with him for about 6 months. And then I moved up to Maine and stayed with one of my grandmothers, my mother's mother. And at that point, I just started investing more time in my arts and in working with kids. And I worked at a crisis unit and, kind of got my therapy by being a therapist and just being available for other people in need and getting to see more about other people's struggles too, to kind of get out of my own head because it was a pretty intense time.
Mm-hmm.
And And then I came to Michigan via and being engaged to someone who is from here. Now, when this person was out on the East Coast, it was actually their first time leaving Michigan to live elsewhere. And upon return, ended up reverting back to the ways of his high school frame of mind, being surrounded with the high school people. And now I didn't realize, not being from here, the intensity of the racial divide here in Michigan. And when I came here first, just to visit, while, it was holidays or summertime, I did feel it a little bit, and I was grateful that I didn't live here. But when I moved here, all of a sudden I was just like, wow, this feels like Texas.
Oh,
What
saying something.
What is this? What is this feeling? And it's a real thing. There's a lot of international players in the US who have set up their new station here, and they've been in operation. And they've been in operation so long that we've almost forgotten that history is not over. But coming back to the forefront with the force, that we better remember, because it's time for us to be in full engagement in navigating a better way, like now, and we can't let them do the same thing over. So the being multi-ethnic is so important, because we literally defy the wars by our presence, however it is that we came here. But I am grateful for it, because it has helped me to not be able to just point my finger in judgment over the things that I know that were wrong, and instead, by feeling the ability to be responsible enough to say, this is what needs to happen, because I can feel it from both sides. I can feel what I would want someone who was overly pompous and aggressive and arrogant, what as an oppressed person, what I would want them to say to make it right, and to how I would want to see them follow through on more than words. Like the evidence of the remorse is what must happen and will happen. If it has to be by force, it will. It is absolutely prophesied. So it's not up to me, but I am here as a navigator, and only through taking responsibility on all sides correctly can that happen. And that's where I know that, having the blood of the people who, through our kindness, Columbus came and did all of this, we have to be part of putting it back together correctly and hold that energy accountable. And whatever that looks like, I feel the weight.
Yeah.
The weight.
Yeah. And I think when we do work together, like, the only way I can help, is by doing my theater and making sure people know about history, and making sure people feel some of the things that our community at large is going through. I feel like we can do it through the arts, and some people do it in other ways. Like, I feel like you are a well-spoken person. I'm enjoying this conversation, and you have a lot of history. I guess I got to ask you one more thing. And I just totally appreciate you sharing your story and sharing your history. It's fantastic. I met you when I was looking at doing some filming for Loving Day. So are you part of that company? What is it? Grandstand? Is it Grandstand Studios? Is that what it is? Grandstand Films?
Grandstand Pictures is film company that is producing a city within a city document. And then GR MyFi is the Grand Rapids Media Initiative and Film Incubator, that is a collective of creatives who have, like, they were interns on the shoot of A City Within a City.
Okay.
That was, I was involved when they were shooting. There are a few more shoots to be done this year still to complete the project. So hopefully I'll be involved in that one. But the collective of creatives is both nurturing and building more camera crew and things for the film industry that's coming here. And then also people who are writers and things. So just trying to really
All together.
Individual work and then also support the community through the film aspects and audio. And so, yeah, it is really nice to kind of be tapping in to expand my skill set, but also to support and learn, stories and get to meet people like you and see what you're doing. And it's been fun and interesting and a lot to try to navigate too, because so many changes always.
Yeah.
And organization, it's a very young project, so it needs organization and things, and I'm trying to help in that aspect, but also working on holding my boundaries as asking for what I need so that I can support myself as the stubborn artist that I am.
Aren't we all that way though? We're stubborn artists. Right?
Yep. Early on, I was like, I will support myself on my arts. I'm practically going to be a doctor by the time I even get to do anything, for the time and money and, dedication and study it takes to get there, to do it. Right. Like honorary doctorate anytime now.
That's who we are, and that's how we learn. That is absolutely how we learn this. When I started Ebony Road Players, I was on the stage. I had never run an artistic business like this. But you want to learn it. You want to be a part of it. And I did, at least. So I think that's why when I met you, I was like, oh, I like this person. Who's this person? I want to know more about her. I look forward to you being a part of our Loving Day celebration. I really appreciate you taking the time to really tell us your story. And I hope that you feel comfortable with this. And I hope that we can do some more stuff together.
I would love it. And I'd love to see one of your productions and maybe even act in one.
Yeah.
On a screenplay that I'm having ideas right now. So hopefully you would be interested in getting involved in that in some capacity.
That would be great. Absolutely awesome. We will talk some more. And again, thank you so much for coming and sharing. And we hope everyone in our community sees you real soon.
Home so much for all you're doing and for having me today. Much love and cynical.
Have a wonderful weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Ebony Road Players Podcast. Creating theater with a purpose is our mission, and that is not possible without people like you. We appreciate you joining us for this podcast and for being a part of our diverse community. To view the video version of this episode and gain access to exclusive Ebony Road Players content and perks, join our community on Patreon at patreon.com/Ebony Road Players. In the words of Zora Neale Hurston, quote, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you," unquote. If you have a story to share, we'd love to hear from you. Contact us on Facebook, Instagram, or our website, ebonyroad.org. And we look forward to continuing the conversation next time on the Ebony Road Players Podcast.